Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear students, today we are going to learn, before we start reading the chapter 11 of Matilda, today we would like to learn a tool, a device that writers generally use to make their writing more effective, right? And the device is called a simile. What is a simile? Kindly look at the examples that I'm writing on the board. In these two examples, what is common is that he is running like a tiger. This person, is compared with a tiger. And two things are common in both examples. Number one, he is running like a tiger. He is as heavy as an elephant. So two things are compared using like or as. So when you compare two things which are not similar, this is a person, that is an animal, he, a tiger, both are compared and they share something common. What do they share? He is running like a tiger. This person and the tiger, both of them share something common. What is it? It's the speed, right? Both of them run very fast. Similarly, in the second example, he is as heavy as an elephant. Two things are compared. A person and an animal, and at the same time they share something common. What is that? Both of them are heavy. So when you compare two things which are not similar using like or as, we call it a simile. S-I-M-I-L-E. The pronunciation is simile. If you use simile in your writing, it will make your writing more effective, it will improve your writing, at the same time it will make your writing better. So today we are going to start chapter 11. The name of the chapter is Bruce, Bob, Trotter and the Cake. So Lavender and Matilda, they were talking about the punishment given by the Trunchbull. So Lavender said, do you think she's mad? Do you think the Trunchbull is mad? And Matilda said, who? She said, the Trunchbull. Matilda said, no, I don't think she's mad, but she's very dangerous. Being in this school is like being in a cage with a cobra. So, just a few moments ago, we learned what a simile is, comparing two dissimilar things using as or like. In this example, being in this school is like being in a cage with a cobra. This is also a simile. Here you compare two things. Being at school and being in a cage with a cobra, and you are comparing these two things using as or like. Here it's like. So being in this school and being in a cage with a snake are compared. They share something common. Being at school, being in a cage with a snake, they share something common. What is that? It is dangerous. When you are in a cage with a snake, it is dangerous. You can be bitten by a snake any moment. Similarly, if you're at school, the school of Trunchbull, you can be humiliated, insulted, and tortured and punished by the Trunchbull any moment. And that's why Matilda is saying, you have to be very fast on your feet, right? So after that, the Trunchbull called out all the students to the assembly, and especially when all the students gathered together in the assembly, she called out Bruce Bob Trotter. He's a student and she was calling for him, Bruce Bob Trotter. So when he was coming, the narrator is describing his features, what kind of person he is. Can you look at the screen? Bruce Bob Trotter, he's an 11-year-old boy who was decidedly large and round and waddled briskly forward. When he was called, he was waddling, or he waddled briskly. What is waddle? To waddle is to walk with short steps And when you waddle, your body moves from side to side like a duck. So waddle is kind of like this, right? You are walking with short steps and walking like a duck. He waddled briskly. What is briskly? When he was called, he was waddling briskly, quickly. Briskly means quickly. And then his plump, flabby face had turned grey with fearful apprehension. His stockings hung about his ankles. So his plump means fat. So he is a large guy, large boy, and his face is plump, flat. Fat. His face had turned grey. To turn grey means to turn pale out of fear. Our face sometimes turns grey. His face had turned grey with fearful apprehension. Apprehension means worry that something bad might happen. His stockings hung about his ankles. So later, what actually happens is the trunk school called out Bruce Bogtrotter because of one reason. Bruce Bogtrotter stole the trunk school's cake yesterday, and it was very delicious. And the trunk school called him just because to punish him. So what the trunk school's plan is, she would bring a large cake and she would force Bruce Bogtrotter eat the whole cake, right? And now just look at how the trunk school changes her tone, how she convinced or forced Bruce Bogtrotter by, making him eat the whole cake. She did a very good trick. She used a very good trick. And the trick is, she changed her tone, right? Sometimes she yelled, sometimes she spoke in a soft voice. Look at the screen, how trunk school changes her tone. At first she was saying, she shouted, "Yesterday morning, during break, you sneaked like a serpent into the kitchen and stole a slice of my private chocolate cake from my tea tray." So in this example, she is actually shouting. And here, you sneaked like a serpent into the kitchen. That's also a simile. So the way Bruce Bogtrotter sneaked or walked secretly or quietly is compared with the way a snake generally sneaks, right? A snake generally moves very quietly and secretly. Similarly, she is comparing Bruce Bogtrotter, the trunk school is comparing Bruce Bogtrotter with a snake sneaking. So she was shouting in this passage, and in the next passage she changed her tone. She said, "There you are, Bogtrotter." The trunk school said, and once again her voice became soft and persuasive. Persuasive means when you make somebody agree, right? When you make somebody convince. So her voice became soft and persuasive, even gentle. So she's saying, "It's all for you, every bit of it. As you enjoyed that slice you had yesterday so very much, I ordered cook to bake you an extra large one, all for yourself." So she is using her tone. Now her voice is very soft, very gentle, very persuasive, not threatening, not shouting, so that Bruce Bogtrotter would eat the whole of the cake, right? And after that, when Bruce Bogtrotter started eating the cake and he just finished one slice of the cake, and then she commanded Bruce Bogtrotter to eat more. And Bruce said, "No, thank you, I think I'm happy with just one slice of cake." And then the trunk school changed her tone once again. From being a very soft and gentle voice, she changed her tone, and now she was yelling once again. She said, "If I tell you to eat, you will eat. You wanted cake, you stole cake, and now you've got cake. What's more, you're going to eat it. You do not leave this platform and nobody leaves this hall until you have eaten the entire cake that is sitting there in front of you. Do I make myself clear, Bogtrotter?" So if you change, when people like trunk school, when they're very angry, when they're actually, they try to frighten the students, when they change their tone, they change their pitch, what happens is it affects the characters tremendously, right? You become confused when somebody changes the tone. Somebody is sometimes shouting, sometimes using a very soft voice and then shouting again. So this affects the characters tremendously. So then she called out, the trunchbull called out the cook. And if you read the description of the cook, you will be sure that the cake was not hygienic. The cake was unhealthy. There was something wrong with the cake. Look at the description of the cook. The cook, a tall, shriveled female. She was a tall, shriveled. Shriveled means very weak and thin. She was a tall, very weak and thin female who looked as though all of her body juices had been dried out of her long ago in a hot oven. Walked onto the platform wearing a dirty white apron. She was wearing a dirty white apron. So if she makes a cake, think about the quality of the cake. Her entrance had clearly been arranged. Her coming, entrance means coming. Her coming had clearly been arranged beforehand, earlier, by the headmistress. So when the cook came, now Bruce Bogtrotter had to eat, the whole cake, not just one slice or two slices, the rest of the cake. And the trunchbull forced Bruce Bogtrotter to eat the rest of the cake. But what were the children doing? What were they thinking? They thought that probably Bruce Bogtrotter would not be able to eat the whole cake. And they thought that probably it's going to be another triumph of the headmistress. So look at the description of what the children were doing. Earlier on, they had sensed impending disaster. When Bruce was called to eat the whole cake, they sensed impending disaster. Impending means coming. Disaster that is going to happen very soon. So they had sensed impending disaster, coming disaster. They had prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the wretched boy, wretched means poor, unfortunate. So they prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the wretched boy, the poor, unfortunate boy, stuffed to the gills, stuffed as full as possible, gills to the gills means as full as possible, with chocolate cake, would have to surrender. Bruce would have to surrender and beg for mercy. And then they would have watched the triumphant trunchbull. They would have watched, triumphant means excited and happy. So they would see trunchbull excited and happy, forcing more and still more cake into the mouth of the gasping boy. Gasping boy means the boy who has difficulty in breathing. So when they were looking at Bruce Bogtrotter eating all these cakes, all the pieces of this cake, the children were watching with wonder. They were amazed. So when Bruce Bogtrotter was about to finish the whole cake, the children's attitude towards Bruce changed, right? Now they were cheering him up. They were saying, "Come on, Brucey." They were saying, "Well done, Brucey. Good for you, Brucey. You've won a gold medal, Brucey." Right? So they were cheering him up, and by being cheered up, Bruce Bogtrotter was very, encouraged, and he was confident that he would be able to eat the whole cake. So eventually he finished all the cake, the large piece of cake, and when the trunchbull looked at Bruce Bogtrotter, the narrative described Bruce as, she glared at Bruce Bogtrotter, who was sitting on his chair like some huge overstuffed grog, replete, comatose, unable to move or to speak. A fine sweat was beading his forehead, but there was a grin of triumph on his face. So she was looking at a boy who was looking like overstuffed grog. Overstuffed means full of something. Grog, insect. So the insect which looked overstuffed, full of something. Replete, again, it means full of something. Comatose means unconscious. So he was looking like something like an overstuffed insect, full of something, and he looked unconscious. Sweat was falling down, but there was green, there was smile of triumph, smile of happiness on his face. So when the headmistress saw this, she she could not resist, she could not bear the scene any longer. So she grabbed the china platter, she raised it high, and then she brought it down with a crash on Bruce Bogtrotter's head. But since Bruce was full of something, his stomach was full, and he was unconscious, and he was also happy, he didn't feel the pain of the china platter. He was very happy. So these actually, what should I say, made the Trunchbull more angry. She was not successful, at least in this case, on this occasion, right? So we're going to end this class right here. In your homework, you have to make 5 examples of simile, right? 5 examples, and you have to answer the question how the Trunchbull changes her tone and how it affects Bruce Bogtrotter. So that's all for today. Jazakumullahu khairan.